Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let's get started. The call came just after midnight. I was still in my office at the Baltimore Medical Examiner's office, finishing paperwork on a routine overdose, when the dispatcher's voice crackled through the intercom. Dr. Morales, we've got a priority case coming in. Violent death, unusual circumstances. Unusual was an understatement. The body arrived in a black van, escorted not by police, but by men in plain suits. They didn't give names, only a case number. The corpse was zipped in a heavy-duty bag, thicker than the standard issue. One of the men leaned close as we wheeled it into the autopsy suite. This one's classified. You didn't see it. You didn't touch it. Understood? I nodded, though my pulse quickened. Classified corpses weren't part of my job description. When they left, I unzipped the bag. The smell hit first. Coppery, sour, wrong. The man on the table was mid-40s, Caucasian, dockworker's build. His skin was grey, mottled with bruises. His eyes were clouded, but not in the way of a typical cadaver. They looked milky, like cataracts that had formed overnight. The intake sheet listed cause of death as violent assault, but the wounds didn't match. His arms and torso were riddled with bite marks, ragged, deep, human in shape but feral in force, flesh torn away, muscle exposed. I dictated into the recorder. Subject is male, approximately 45, multiple bite wounds inconsistent with animal attack. Pattern suggests human dentition, but with unusual force. I made the Y-shaped incision, peeling back skin and muscle. The organs were intact, but the blood was strange. Thicker, darker, sluggish. It clung to my gloves like tar. Then the body twitched. I froze, scalpel hovering. For a moment I thought it was a muscle spasm, post-mortem reflex. But then the chest rose. The man's eyes snapped open, milky white staring at me. His jaw unhinged, teeth snapping. I stumbled back, scalpel clattering to the floor. The corpse lurched upward, restraint straining. A guttural moan rattled from its throat. Adrenaline surged. I grabbed the nearest tool, a bone saw, and swung. The blade caught his shoulder, knocking him back onto the table. He writhed, snapping at the air, his hands clawing. I slammed the emergency alarm. The doors burst open, orderlies rushing in. Together we pinned the body, strapping it down. It thrashed, moaning, teeth gnashing inches from my face. My recorder was still running. My voice shook as I spoke. Subject is exhibiting post-mortem motor activity. This is not rigor mortis. This is something else. The orderlies looked at me, eyes wide with terror. What the hell is this, Doc? I didn't answer. I didn't know. Minutes later, the men in suits returned. They didn't look surprised. One of them injected something into the corpse's neck. The thrashing slowed, then stopped. The body went limp. The man turned to me. You didn't see this. You didn't record this. I glanced at my recorder, still blinking red. I slipped it into my pocket before they noticed. They zipped the body back into the heavy bag and wheeled it out. No paperwork, no signatures, no chain of custody. Just gone. When the room was empty, I sat on the stool, my hands trembling. I replayed the moment in my mind, the eyes snapping open, the moan, the teeth. I'd seen thousands of corpses in my career. None of them had ever tried to bite me. I opened my notebook and wrote everything down, every wound, every twitch, every sound. If they wanted silence, they wouldn't get it from me. Because I was a scientist, and science demands the truth. That night, as I left the morgue, the city felt different. The streets were quiet, the air heavy. I couldn't shake the image of those milky eyes, the sound of that moan. I whispered into the recorder, my voice low. This is Dr. Elena Morales. Baltimore medical examiner. Tonight I examined a corpse that wasn't dead. If this recording is found, know this. The dead are not staying dead. I clicked it off, my hands still shaking. The outbreak had begun. And I was the first to see it. By morning, the morgue was crawling with strangers. They weren't police, and they weren't my colleagues. They wore CDC jackets, but their movements were military. Precise. Rehearsed. They swept through the halls like they owned the place, barking orders, sealing doors, confiscating files. I was summoned to the conference room. 2 men and 1 woman waited for me. The woman introduced herself as Dr. Marcus Hale, CDC liaison. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. Dr. Morales, we need to discuss the body you examined last night. I sat across from them, my recorder hidden in my coat pocket, the one that moved. Hale's expression didn't change. The subject was suffering from a rare neurological infection. Post-mortem spasms are not uncommon. I leaned forward. That wasn't a spasm. His eyes opened. He tried to bite me. The man beside her, a broad figure in a dark suit, cut in. You will not repeat that claim outside this room. Do you understand? I stared at him. I'm a forensic pathologist. My job is to report what I see. Hale slid a folder across the table. Inside was a non-disclosure agreement, stamped with federal seals. Sign this. Effective immediately, all findings related to this case are classified under national security. My pulse quickened. Classified? Since when does the CDC classify autopsies? The man's jaw tightened. Since now. I closed the folder. No. The room went still. Hale's voice softened, almost sympathetic. Dr. Morales, you're a scientist. You understand the importance of preventing panic. If the public hears words like reanimation or the dead walking, chaos will follow. We need to control the narrative. I met her gaze. Control the narrative or bury the truth? Her silence was answer enough. They escorted me back to my office. My files were gone, my samples, my notes, even the scalpel I'd dropped, all confiscated. The morgue felt hollow, stripped of evidence. But they hadn't taken everything. I still had my recorder. That night I replayed the audio, my voice describing the corpse, the moment it twitched, the panic in my tone. Proof. I copied the file onto a flash drive and hid it in my desk. If they wanted silence, they'd have to erase me. The next day, Hale returned. She stood in my office, her expression unreadable. You're being reassigned. Effective immediately, you'll assist with containment protocols. Fieldwork. I frowned. Containment of what? She didn't answer. Instead, she handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was an assignment order. Johns Hopkins Hospital. Quarantine wing. My stomach dropped. You're sending me into the hot zone. Hale's voice was steady. You're the only one who's seen it up close. We need your expertise. I wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed to walk away. But I couldn't. Not after what I'd seen. Not when I knew the truth was being buried. I nodded. Fine. But I keep my own notes. Her lips curved in the faintest smile. Of course. She left without another word. That night I packed my bag. Gloves, masks, recorder, notebook. I stared at the flash drive hidden in my desk. It felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried. I whispered into the recorder, my voice low. This is Dr. Elena Morales. The CDC has seized the body and classified the case. They are silencing the truth. But I will not be silenced. Tomorrow I enter the quarantine zone. I clicked it off, my hands trembling. The outbreak was spreading, and I was being sent straight into its heart. The CDC wanted me to forget the corpse, but I couldn't. The man's face haunted me, the milky eyes, the snapping teeth, the way his body refused to stay still. I needed to know who he was, where he came from, and how he ended up on my table. His file had been scrubbed from the morgue system, but I had copied the intake sheet before the suits arrived. Name: Thomas Avery. Age: 46. Occupation: dock worker, Port of Baltimore. Cause of death: violent assault. I drove to the harbour at dawn. The docks were quiet, cranes looming like skeletons against the grey sky, cargo containers stacked high, ships moored in silence. The smell of salt and diesel clung to the air. I found Dock 14, where Avery had worked. A foreman eyed me warily when I flashed my badge. Medical examiner. I need to ask about Thomas Avery. The man's face tightened. Tom, he's dead. I know. I performed the autopsy, but I need to know what happened before that. The foreman hesitated, then lowered his voice. He wasn't right, Doc. Came in last week looking pale, sweating. Said he felt sick. We told him to go home, but he wouldn't. Kept unloading containers like nothing was wrong. What containers? He pointed toward the far end of the pier. Shipment from overseas. Didn't say where, just crates of, I don't know, medical waste. Hazmat stuff. We weren't supposed to open them. My stomach tightened. And Avery? The foreman's eyes darted. He cut his hand on one of the crates. Just a scratch. But after that, he changed. Stopped talking. Started staring. Couple days later, he attacked one of the guys. Bit him. Like an animal. I swallowed hard. What happened to the man he bit? The foreman shook his head. CDC took him. Haven't seen him since. I scribbled notes, my pulse racing. A cut on a crate, a bite, a disappearance. The infection wasn't random. It had a source. As I left the docks, I noticed a shipping manifest pinned to the office wall. I snapped a photo before anyone could stop me. The crates Avery handled had come from Savannah, Georgia, offloaded from a freighter registered in Hong Kong. Destination: Federal Research Facility, undisclosed. The infection hadn't started in Baltimore. It had arrived here. That night, I reviewed the manifest in my apartment. The codes were vague, but one line stood out. Biohazard class the 4-4. Handle with extreme caution. I whispered into my recorder. This is Dr. Elena Morales. Patient 0 Thomas Avery was exposed at the Port of Baltimore. The infection may have originated from overseas cargo, labeled as biohazard. The CDC is aware and is covering it up. A knock at my door made me freeze. I slipped the recorder into my pocket and opened the door a crack. 2 men in suits stood there, the same kind who had taken the body. Dr. Morales, one said smoothly. We need to speak with you. I forced a smile. About what? About your visit to the docks. My blood ran cold. They were watching me. I'm busy, I said, and shut the door. Their fists pounded against it. Dr. Morales, open the door, now. I grabbed my bag and bolted out the fire escape. Down the alley. Into the night. My heart hammering. By the time I reached my car, the men were gone. But I knew they'd be back. I drove until the city lights faded, pulling over on a deserted road. I sat in the dark, recorder in hand. The infection didn't start here. It was brought here. In crates labeled as biohazard, the CDC is not trying to stop it. They're trying to contain the story, which means it's already out of control. I clicked it off, staring into the night. The corpse on my table hadn't been the beginning. It had been the warning. And I was the only one listening. Johns Hopkins Hospital loomed like a fortress of glass and steel. But inside it felt like a prison. The quarantine wing had been sealed off with plastic sheeting and armed guards. I flashed my reassignment papers, and the soldiers waved me through with the same dead eyes I'd seen on the suits at the morgue. The air inside was heavy with disinfectant, but it couldn't mask the stench of sickness. Rows of beds lined the ward, each occupied by patients who looked more corpse than human. Their skin was grey, their eyes clouded, their breathing shallow. Some were restrained. wrists bound to the rails. A nurse whispered as she passed me, "They don't stay dead." I froze. "What do you mean?" She glanced around, then leaned close. "They crash, flatline, and then they come back. Stronger. Meaner." Before I could respond, Dr. Marcus Hale appeared, clipboard in hand. "Dr. Morales, good, you're here." I followed her down the row. She spoke briskly, as if rehearsed. "These patients are suffering from a viral encephalitis, highly contagious but manageable. We're studying progression." I stopped at a bed. The patient's chest barely rose. His lips were blue, his eyes glassy. "He's gone," I said. Hale didn't even look up. "Wait." The monitor flatlined. The nurse reached for a sheet. Then the patient's body convulsed. His eyes snapped open, milky and wild. He tore against the restraint, snarling. The nurse screamed. The patient ripped free, lunging at her throat. Blood sprayed across the plastic sheeting. Chaos erupted. "Restrain him!" Hale shouted. But it was too late. The infected man sank his teeth into the nurse's shoulder. She shrieked, collapsing. Guards rushed in, rifles raised. Shots cracked, echoing through the ward. The patient's skull burst and he fell limp. The ward dissolved into panic. Patients thrashed in their beds, some flatlining, others reanimating. Guards fired indiscriminately, bullets tearing through flesh and plastic. Nurses screamed, doctors fled. I ducked behind a cart, my recorder in hand. My voice shook. "This is Dr. Elena Morales, Johns Hopkins Hospital, quarantine wing. Patients are reanimating after death. The infection is not neurological, it is systemic. The dead are rising." Another patient broke free, lunging at a doctor. The man's screams echoed as teeth tore into his face. Blood pooled on the floor, slick under my shoes. Hale grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the exit. "We have to go." We stumbled into the hallway, alarms blaring. Red lights flashed, doors slamming shut. Soldiers shouted orders, sealing the wing. Behind us, the screams grew louder, more desperate. I pulled free, gasping, You knew this would happen." Hale's face was pale, but her voice was steady. "We suspected. That's why you're here. To confirm." "Confirm what? That the dead don't stay dead?" She didn't answer. We burst into the lobby, where families pressed against barricades demanding answers. Soldiers shoved them back, shouting. A mother clutched her child, screaming, "My husband's in there! What are you doing to him?" The soldiers didn't respond. They sealed the doors with chains. I raised my camera, filming. My voice was hoarse. "The government is locking families out while their loved ones are slaughtered inside. They are not saving lives, they are containing the truth." Hale yanked the camera down. "Stop! You'll get yourself killed." I glared at her. Better me than the truth. Outside, the city bustled as if nothing was wrong. Cars honked, people hurried to work, oblivious. But inside Johns Hopkins, the dead were walking. That night I sat in my apartment, blood still on my shoes. I replayed the footage, the screams, the gunfire, the flatline turning into a moan. I whispered into the recorder. "This is no longer an isolated incident. The infection is spreading. Hospitals are collapsing. The dead are rising in Baltimore." I clicked it off, my hands trembling. The outbreak was no longer a secret. It was a war dot. The summons arrived on official letterhead, stamped with the seal of the Department of Health and Human Services. But the black SUV that picked me up outside my apartment wasn't driven by health officials. It was military. The ride to Washington was silent, the city skyline looming like a ghost. Barricades blocked streets, soldiers patrolled intersections, but the public was told it was routine security. I knew better. They escorted me into a federal building near the Capitol. Inside, the air was cold, sterile. A conference room waited, its long table lined with officials in suits and uniforms. At the head sat Colonel Briggs, The same man I'd glimpsed at Johns Hopkins. His presence confirmed what I feared. This wasn't just a medical crisis. It was a military one. Dr. Marcus Hale was there too, her expression unreadable. She gestured for me to sit. Briggs began without preamble. Dr. Morales, you've been present at several incidents. The morgue, the hospital, the docks. You've seen things the public cannot know. I folded my hands. The public deserves to know. A murmur rippled down the table. Hale's voice was calm, rehearsed. What you've witnessed are isolated outbreaks of a rare pathogen. Containment is underway. But if your version of events spreads, if words like reanimation or the dead walking reach the public, panic will kill more people than the infection. I leaned forward. Panic isn't the problem. The problem is that the dead are rising and you're lying about it. The room went still. Briggs's jaw tightened. Watch your tone, doctor. I didn't flinch. I watched a corpse try to bite me on my autopsy table. I watched patients at Johns Hopkins flatline and then attack nurses. I watched soldiers fire into civilians at a quarantine zone. Don't tell me this is contained. Hale's eyes flickered, but her voice stayed even. You're a scientist. You understand the importance of controlled messaging. If the truth spreads unchecked, society collapses. I slammed my notebook on the table. Society is already collapsing. You're just trying to control the narrative. Briggs leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. You're out of line. You're here because we need your cooperation, not your defiance. I met his gaze. Then you'll be disappointed. The silence was suffocating. Finally, Hale slid a folder toward me. Inside were photographs, grainy images of bodies in streets, soldiers firing into crowds, entire neighborhoods burning. This is what happens when panic spreads, she said softly. Do you want more of this? I stared at the photos, my chest tight. They weren't wrong, panic was deadly. But so was silence. I closed the folder. The truth will come out, with or without me. Briggs's fist slammed the table. If you leak classified information, you'll be charged with treason. The word hung in the air like a blade. I forced myself to breathe. If telling the truth is treason, then maybe you're on the wrong side. The officials erupted in murmurs. Briggs's face turned red. Hale raised a hand, silencing the room. Enough. Dr. Morales, you're dismissed. But understand this. We're watching you. One wrong move, and you'll disappear. They escorted me out, the SUV waiting. The ride back to Baltimore was longer, heavier. I stared out the window at the city, wondering how much longer it would stand. That night in my apartment, I replayed the meeting in my mind. The threats, the lies, the photographs. They weren't trying to stop the outbreak. They were trying to control the story. I pulled out my recorder, my voice steady despite the fear. This is Dr. Eleanor Morales. Today I was summoned to Washington. Officials threatened me with treason if I spoke the truth. They are silencing scientists, burying evidence, and weaponizing fear. The infection is spreading, and the government is more afraid of panic than of the dead themselves. I clicked it off, my hands trembling. The war wasn't just against the infected. It was against the truth. The morgue was supposed to be my sanctuary. Cold, sterile, predictable. The dead stayed dead, and I could make sense of them. But when I returned after the briefing in D.C., the air inside felt wrong. Thick, metallic, humming with unease. The night shift was quiet. Too quiet. The receptionist's desk was empty. The lights dimmed. My footsteps echoed down the corridor as I pushed open the doors to the autopsy suite. And froze. The gurneys were overturned, cabinets smashed, instruments scattered across the floor. Blood streaked the tiles in long, dragging arcs. Then I heard it. A low moan. I turned slowly. One of the body lockers was rattling, the steel door buckling outward. Another moan joined it, then another. The sound grew, a chorus of hunger. My chest tightened. I stepped back, recorder in hand. "This is Dr. Elena Morales. I've returned to the Baltimore Medical Examiner's office. Multiple corpses are moving. They're trying to get out." The first locker burst open. A corpse tumbled out, its skin grey, its eyes milky. It landed on all fours, then lunged at me with a guttural snarl. I grabbed a tray and swung, knocking it back. It crashed into another locker, which burst open. Another body spilled out, then another. Within seconds, the room was alive with the dead. They staggered toward me, teeth snapping, hands clawing. Their moans filled the air, drowning out my own ragged breaths. I bolted for the door, but one of them grabbed my lab coat. I tore free, stumbling into the hallway. The corpses followed, their footsteps dragging, their moans echoing. I sprinted toward the stairwell, my shoes slipping on blood. Behind me, the morgue erupted in chaos. Doors slamming open, bodies spilling out. Every corpse in storage was waking. The stairwell door was locked. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking. The moans grew louder, closer, fingers clawed at my back. The lock clicked. I shoved the door open and slammed it behind me. The corpses pounded against it, their fists rattling the steel. I stumbled down the stairs, gasping. On the landing, I found 2 orderlies. What was left of them. Their throats were torn out, their eyes wide with terror. I whispered into the recorder, my voice trembling. "The infection is not isolated. Every corpse in the morgue is reanimating. The dead are rising en masse. This is no longer an outbreak. This is an epidemic." I pushed through the basement door into the storage level. The smell hit me. Rot, blood, smoke. The generators hummed, lights flickering. Then I saw them. Dozens of corpses staggering through the hall. Some wore hospital gowns, others body bags. Their moans rose in a terrible chorus. I ducked into the pathology lab, slamming the door. My hands shook as I shoved a cabinet against it. The pounding began immediately, fists hammering the wood. I scanned the room. My samples were gone, confiscated by the CDC, but one vial remained, hidden behind a microscope, a drop of blackened blood, thick and tar-like. I pocketed it, my heart racing. Proof. The pounding grew louder, the door buckled. I grabbed a fire axe from the wall and smashed the window. Glass shattered, cold air rushing in. I climbed through, cutting my hands, and dropped into the alley outside. The night was alive with sirens. Helicopters roared overhead. Soldiers shouted, their rifles cracking. The morgue's windows glowed orange. Fires spreading inside. I stumbled into the street, clutching the vial and my recorder. Behind me, the morgue erupted in flames. Corpses staggered from the doors, their bodies burning, their moans rising into the night. I raised the recorder, my voice hoarse. "The Baltimore Medical Examiner's office has fallen. The dead are rising in numbers too great to contain. The morgue is burning, but the infection is already beyond these walls. This city is lost." I clicked it off, my hands trembling. The morgue had been my sanctuary. Now it was a graveyard. And Baltimore was next. Baltimore was no longer a city. It was a cage. The government called it a containment perimeter. To the people trapped inside, it was a death sentence. Entire neighborhoods were sealed with razor wire and concrete barricades. Soldiers patrolled the streets, rifles raised, their orders clear. No one in, no one out. I had to see it for myself. I slipped past the checkpoints at dawn, blending with a group of nurses carrying supplies. My badge still carried weight, though the soldiers' eyes lingered too long, suspicion etched into their faces. Inside the zone, the air was heavy with smoke and fear. Row houses stood silent. Windows boarded, doors chained. Families peered from cracks, their eyes hollow. Children clutched stuffed animals, too afraid to cry. The streets were littered with abandoned cars, their doors hanging open, groceries rotting in the back seats. I raised my recorder. "This is Dr. Elena Morales. I've entered the first official quarantine zone in Baltimore. The government claims this is for public safety, but what I see is imprisonment." A woman approached, her face gaunt, her hands trembling. "You're a doctor?" "Yes," I said softly. She grabbed my sleeve. "Please. My husband, he's sick. They won't let us out. They say he's infected, but he's just feverish. Please." I followed her into a narrow row house. Inside, a man lay on a mattress, drenched in sweat, his skin pale. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy but not yet milky. He whispered, "Help me." I checked his pulse. Weak, but steady. He wasn't gone. Not yet. Before I could speak, the door burst open. Soldiers stormed in, rifles raised. "Step away from the patient!" The woman screamed. "He's not infected!" The sergeant's voice was cold. "Orders are clear. Suspected cases are to be removed." I stood between them. "He's alive. He needs treatment, not execution." The sergeant's eyes narrowed. "Doctor, step aside." I didn't move. The soldiers dragged the man from the mattress, ignoring his wife's screams. She clawed at them, sobbing, until one shoved her to the floor. They hauled the man into the street, where a truck waited. Its back was filled with others, sick, weak, terrified. The woman collapsed beside me, her sobs breaking the silence. I raised my recorder, my voice shaking. "The government is not treating the sick. They are removing them. Where they are taken, I don't know, but the families are left behind, broken." Gunfire cracked in the distance. I followed the sound, weaving through alleys until I reached the barricade. A crowd of civilians pressed against the wire, shouting, pleading, "Let us out! We're not sick!" Soldiers stood on the other side, rifles aimed. A man climbed the barricade, desperation in his eyes. He didn't make it halfway before a shot rang out. He fell, blood pooling beneath him. The crowd screamed, scattering. Mothers shielded children, men shouted curses. The soldiers didn't flinch. I filmed it all, my chest tight. This is not containment. This is execution. The government is killing its own citizens to maintain control. As I turned to leave, I saw movement at the edge of the crowd. A figure staggered from a doorway, its skin grey, its eyes milky. The infected. The crowd screamed. Panic erupted. The infected lunged, dragging a woman to the ground. Blood sprayed as it tore into her throat. The soldiers opened fire, bullets ripping through the infected and through civilians caught in the chaos. Bodies fell, screams echoing. I ducked into an alley, heart pounding. The zone was collapsing. That night I sat in the ruins of a church, the recorder in my lap. My voice was hoarse. The first quarantine zone has failed. The infected are inside. The soldiers are killing civilians. Baltimore is no longer a city. It is a graveyard. I clicked it off, staring at the flickering candle. The government had built walls to contain the infection, but all they had done was trap the living with the dead dot. The university was abandoned, but its bones still stood. Johns Hopkins Satellite Campus in East Baltimore, once a place of lectures and labs, now a hollow shell. Windows shattered, hallways dark, classrooms stripped bare. But in the ruins, I saw possibility. I needed a lab, somewhere to study the pathogen, to prove what I'd seen wasn't madness. The morgue was gone, the hospital overrun, the government silencing everything. If the truth was to survive, it had to be here, in the shadows. I broke into the biology wing with a crowbar, the door groaning open. Dust motes swirled in the beam of my flashlight. The smell of mildew and chemicals lingered. I found a lab on the second floor, its benches still lined with microscopes, centrifuges, glassware. Power flickered from a backup generator in the basement. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I unpacked my bag, gloves, masks, notebook, recorder, and the vial. The last sample from the morgue, a drop of blackened blood that pulsed like tar, proof of the infection. I whispered into the recorder. "This is Dr. Elena Morales. I've established a makeshift laboratory at the abandoned Hopkins campus. I have one viable sample. Tonight I begin analysis." I set the vial under the microscope. The cells were unlike anything I'd seen. They weren't dead, but they weren't alive either. They writhed, twitching, dividing in unnatural ways. The nucleus was fractured, the membrane unstable, yet the cells refused to die. I scribbled notes furiously. "The pathogen appears to override cellular death. It reprograms tissue, forcing activity long after biological function ceases. This is not decomposition. This is reanimation." I ran a test, exposing the sample to heat. Normal pathogens would denature, collapse. But this one resisted, the cells clinging to form, writhing even as the temperature rose. I whispered, "It doesn't die. It adapts." Hours passed. My eyes burned, my hands shook. I injected a drop into a rat cadaver I'd found in the storage freezer. At first, nothing. Then the body twitched. Its paw jerked. Its eyes fluttered open, milky and blind. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. Even in death, the pathogen forced movement. I recorded everything. The infection is not limited to humans. It reanimates any mammalian tissue. This is not a virus. This is something else, something designed. The word hung heavy in the air. Designed. I thought of the shipping manifest, the crates labelled biohazard, the government's silence, the military's presence. This wasn't an accident. A crash echoed down the hall. I froze, heart pounding. Footsteps shuffled closer, slow and dragging. I killed the light, crouching behind the bench. The door creaked open, a figure staggered in, a janitor's uniform, skin grey, eyes milky. The infected. It moaned, lurching towards the benches. My breath caught. I gripped the fire axe, waiting. It knocked over glassware, the crash echoing. I swung, the blade sinking into its skull. It collapsed, twitching, then stilled. I gasped, recorder in hand. The infection has reached the campus. The dead are wandering even here. There is no safe zone. I dragged the body into the hall, locking the door. My hands shook as I scrubbed the blood from the bench. The rat cadaver still twitched in its cage, a grotesque reminder. I stared at the vial, the black blood swirling. This wasn't just a disease, it was a weapon. That night I sat in the dark, recorder in my lap. The pathogen is resilient, adaptive and universal. It reanimates tissue across species. It cannot be killed by heat. It cannot be contained by walls. If this spreads unchecked, humanity will fall, and I fear it already has. I clicked it off, my chest tight. The hunt for answers had begun. But the truth was worse than I imagined. The university lab gave me answers, but answers weren't enough. The truth had to reach people who could act on it. My notes, my recordings, my samples, they were evidence. But evidence without a voice was just paper in the dark. That's when I remembered him. Daniel Reyes, Washington Herald. The journalist who had been broadcasting from the ruins, his footage spreading online despite government censorship. I had seen his reports. Grainy videos of the Metro massacre, the newsroom siege, the evacuation collapse. He was reckless, but he was telling the truth. If anyone could amplify my findings, it was him. I tracked him through whispers. Survivors spoke of a reporter moving north, carrying a camera like a weapon. Finally, in a burned-out diner on the edge of Pennsylvania, I found him. He was thinner than his broadcast suggested, his eyes hollow, his clothes stained with ash. But when he saw me, recognition flickered. "You're Morales," he said, "the scientist. And you're Reyes, the journalist." We sat across from each other in the empty diner, the silence broken only by the crackle of a dying neon sign. I placed my notebook on the table, sliding it toward him. "I examined the first corpse. I've studied the pathogen. I know what it is." He opened the notebook, scanning the pages. His hands trembled. This is proof." "It's more than proof," I said. "It's a warning. The pathogen doesn't just kill, it reanimates, it adapts, it spreads across species, and it doesn't die." He looked up, his eyes burning. "I've filmed the aftermath, the metro, the highways, the towns, but I couldn't explain it." "Not really. People think it's hysteria or panic. But this," he tapped the notebook, "this makes it undeniable." I leaned closer. "The government knows. They're covering it up. They threatened me with treason. They're not trying to stop it. They're trying to control it." Reyes's jaw tightened. "Then we expose them. Together." We spent hours trading evidence. I showed him the vial of blackened blood, the microscope images, the rat cadaver twitching in its cage. He showed me footage of soldiers firing into civilians, of barricades collapsing, of families torn apart. Two halves of the same story: science and journalism, proof and witness. By dawn, we had a plan. Reyes would broadcast my findings, merging them with his footage. Together we would create a message too powerful to silence. But nothing in this world stayed secret for long. As we packed our things, headlights flared outside the diner. Trucks, engines growling, men in suits and soldiers spilling out, rifles raised. Reyes cursed. "They found us." We bolted through the back into the alley. Bullets shattered the windows, glass raining down. We sprinted through the ruins, our breath ragged, the soldiers shouting behind us. Reyes clutched his camera. I clutched my notebook. Proof in our hands. Truth in our grasp. We ducked into an abandoned gas station, crouching behind the counter. My heart pounded, my hands shaking. Reyes whispered, "They'll never stop, not until we're silenced." I met his gaze. "Then we don't stop either." The soldiers swept past, their boots echoing. We waited until the night swallowed them, then slipped out the back. That night, by the light of a dying lantern, Reyes filmed me. I spoke into his camera, my voice steady despite the fear. My name is Dr. Elena Morales. I was the medical examiner who performed the first autopsy. I have studied the pathogen. It is not a virus. It is not a disease. It is something else. Something that reanimates the dead, something that can't be killed. The government knows. They are lying to you. If you hear this, know the truth. The dead are walking, and the living are being silenced. Reyes lowered the camera, his eyes fierce. "That's it. That's the story." I whispered into my recorder, my voice hoarse. "This is Dr. Elena Morales. Tonight I joined forces with journalist Daniel Reyes. Together we will expose the truth. Together we will fight the silence." The night was dark, the road uncertain. But for the first time, I wasn't alone. Science had found its voice. And the truth had found its weapon. Washington, D.C. had always felt untouchable. The marble monuments, the domes and spires, the endless security details. It was the heart of American power. But when Reyes and I arrived, the city was already bleeding. Checkpoints ringed the streets, Humvees blocking intersections, soldiers shouting orders. Civilians pressed against barricades, waving IDs, begging to be let through. Helicopters roared overhead, their searchlights sweeping across the National Mall. The air reeked of smoke and fear. Reyes filmed everything, his camera steady despite the chaos. This is Daniel Reyes, Washington Herald. The capital is under siege. The government insists it's secure, but the streets tell another story. I whispered into my recorder. This is Dr. Elena Morales. The infection has reached Washington. Containment is failing. We pushed towards the capital, where crowds had gathered. Families clutched suitcases, children cried, soldiers barked orders. A loudspeaker blared, "Remain calm, evacuation is underway." But calm was impossible. A scream cut through the crowd. A man collapsed, convulsing, his eyes rolled back, his skin grey. His wife knelt beside him, sobbing. Then his body jerked. His eyes snapped open, milky and wild. He lunged at her throat. Panic erupted. The crowd surged, trampling each other. Soldiers fired into the air, shouting for order. But the infection spread like fire. More bodies convulsed, more eyes turned milky. The dead rose among the living, tearing into flesh. Reyes filmed it all, his voice shaking. The outbreak is here. The capital is falling. I grabbed his arm. We have to move. We pushed through the chaos, dodging soldiers and civilians alike. Blood sprayed across the steps of the Capitol, staining the marble red. The dome loomed above us, but inside was no safer. We stumbled into the rotunda. Senators and staffers huddled, their faces pale. Guards sealed the doors, rifles raised. A man in a suit shouted into a phone, his voice breaking. "We need extraction now. The building is compromised." Then the pounding began. The infected slammed against the doors, their moans echoing through the chamber. The wood splintered, the barricades buckled. A senator clutched my arm, his eyes wild. "You're a doctor. Tell me this isn't real." I met his gaze. It's real, and it's too late. The doors burst open. The infected poured in, their moans deafening. Chaos erupted. Guards fired, bullets cracking. Staffers screamed, scattering. Blood sprayed across the murals of American history. Reyes pulled me toward a side corridor. "This way." We sprinted through the halls, past portraits of presidents, past flags and statues. The symbols of power crumbled around us, drowned in screams. We burst into the Senate chamber. Papers littered the floor, chairs overturned. A handful of survivors huddled, their eyes wide. Reyes raised his camera. "The Capitol has been breached. The infection is inside the halls of government. America's center of power is collapsing." I whispered into my recorder. "This is Dr. Elena Morales. The infection has reached the Capitol. The government is falling. The nation is leaderless." Gunfire echoed down the hall. The infected were coming. We fled through a service tunnel, the air thick with dust. The tunnel opened onto the National Mall. Fires burned, smoke rising into the night. The Washington Monument loomed like a tombstone. Helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights sweeping. One dipped low, a rope ladder dangling. Civilians surged toward it, clawing, screaming. The helicopter tilted, struggling under the weight. Then the infected swarmed, dragging people down. The helicopter spun, then crashed into the mall, exploding in a fireball. The crowd screamed. Reyes filmed, his voice hoarse. "The evacuation has failed. The Capitol is lost." I clutched my recorder, my voice trembling. This is no longer an outbreak. This is the collapse of a nation. We stumbled into the night, the Capitol burning behind us. The dome glowed red, smoke rising into the sky. Washington had fallen. And with it, America. The highways north of Washington were rivers of steel and desperation. Cars abandoned in endless lines, doors hanging open, belongings scattered across the asphalt. Families had fled on foot, leaving behind strollers, suitcases, even photographs fluttering in the wind. Reyes and I joined a convoy at dawn. Scientists, soldiers, and civilians crammed into armored trucks. The government called it strategic relocation. To us, it was escape. The lead Humvee rumbled forward, its gunner scanning the tree line. Behind it, a bus carried survivors, faces pressed to the glass. Our truck followed, packed with crates of medical supplies and what little research I'd salvaged. Reyes sat beside me, his camera balanced on his knees. He whispered, "This isn't a convoy. It's a funeral procession." I didn't argue. The road stretched ahead, cracked and broken. Smoke rose from distant towns. Helicopters circled overhead, but none landed. The radio crackled with static, punctuated by frantic voices. "Outbreak in Frederick, perimeter breached, casualties mounting." I clutched my recorder. "This is Dr. Elena Morales. We are fleeing Washington. The infection has spread north. The highways are clogged with the dead and the desperate. The government calls this relocation, but it is retreat." Hours passed. The convoy slowed near a tunnel, its mouth yawning black. The lead Humvee halted. The gunner scanned the shadows. Then the moans began. Low at first, then rising, echoing from the tunnel. Figures staggered into the light. Dozens, then hundreds. Their eyes milky, their jaws snapping. The infected. "Contact!" the gunner shouted. The Humvee's turret roared, bullets tearing through the first wave. Bodies fell, but more surged forward, climbing over the dead. The convoy erupted in chaos. Soldiers fired from the trucks. Civilians screamed. The bus lurched, its windows shattering as infected swarmed the sides. Reyes filmed. His voice hoarse. "The convoy is under attack. The infected are everywhere." I grabbed his arm. "We have to move!" Our driver slammed the accelerator, the truck barreling forward. We smashed through the horde, bodies thudding against the grille. Blood sprayed across the windshield. But the infected clung to the sides, clawing at the doors. One smashed its face against the glass, teeth gnashing inches from my head. I swung the butt of my recorder, shattering the window. The infected tumbled away, but more climbed aboard. Soldiers fired point blank, the truck rocking with every shot. The bus behind us wasn't so lucky. Infected poured through the broken windows, dragging passengers into the street. Their screams echoed as the bus veered off the road, crashing into a ditch. Flames erupted, black smoke rising. Reyes turned his camera away, his face pale. "God help them!" The convoy splintered. Trucks swerved, soldiers shouting. The Humvee's turret jammed, its gunner dragged down. The infected swarmed the vehicle, tearing into the crew. Our driver shouted, "We can't hold them. We have to cut through." We veered off the highway, crashing through a guardrail into the woods. Branches scraped the sides, the truck bouncing over roots. Behind us, the convoy dissolved into fire and screams. We didn't stop until the moans faded. The truck rolled to a halt in a clearing, the survivors gasping for breath. I stumbled out, my hands shaking. The crates of supplies were intact, my notebook still clutched to my chest. But half the convoy was gone. Reyes lowered his camera, his voice breaking. "We were supposed to be the future. Scientists, doctors, soldiers. And now we're just survivors." I whispered into my recorder. "The convoy has been destroyed. The infection overwhelmed us on the highway. Half our number is gone. The road north is no longer safe. There is no safe road." The survivors huddled around a fire that night, their faces hollow. Children cried softly, mothers clutching them close. Soldiers stared into the flames, their rifles limp in their hands. Reyes sat beside me, his camera dark. "How do we keep going?" I looked at the notebook in my lap, the vial of black blood in my pocket, because the truth has to survive. Even if we don't. The fire crackled, the night alive with distant moans. The road out had promised escape, but all it delivered was loss. The convoy was gone. The highway was gone. Washington was gone. All that remained was the road north, and the faint hope of somewhere untouched. We found Millbrook by accident, a small Pennsylvania town, its streets quiet, its houses shuttered. The locals eyed us with suspicion as we rolled in, our truck battered, our clothes stained with ash and blood. Survivors didn't trust strangers anymore. Strangers meant infection. Strangers meant death. But Millbrook hadn't fallen. Yet. Its people had built barricades of cars and lumber, posted guards with hunting rifles, rationed food from the church pantry. They let us in only after searching us, their eyes lingering on my medical bag. "You a doctor?" one asked. "Scientist," I said. "Pathologist." That word carried weight. They led us to the high school, now a makeshift shelter. Classrooms were filled with cots, the gym a mess hall. The science wing had been abandoned, its chalkboard still covered in equations. "This will do," I whispered. I set up my lab in the chemistry classroom. The benches were dusty, the microscopes old, but it was enough. I unpacked my notebook, my recorder, the vial of black blood. Proof. Reyes filmed as I worked, his voice low. "This is Daniel Reyes, Washington Herald. We found temporary refuge in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Dr. Elena Morales is establishing a laboratory in the ruins of a high school. Here she will continue her research into the pathogen." I placed the vial under the microscope. The cells writhed, twitching, dividing. But something was different. They were faster, more aggressive. I scribbled notes. "The pathogen is mutating. It is no longer stable. Each host accelerates its evolution." I tested samples from local corpses, hunters who had fallen defending the barricades. Their blood was darker, thicker, the cells more violent. The infection was adapting to rural environments, spreading faster. I whispered into the recorder. "The pathogen is not static. It changes with every host. What began in Baltimore is no longer the same in Pennsylvania. This is not one outbreak, it is many." The townspeople grew restless. Rumors spread that I had brought the infection with me. Mothers clutched their children tighter when I passed. Men muttered in corners, their eyes hard. One night, the mayor confronted me in the lab. A stern woman with calloused hands, she stood in the doorway, her voice sharp. "Your work scares people. They think you're making it worse." I met her gaze. "I'm trying to save you. Without science, you're blind. Without knowledge, you're already dead." She hesitated, then nodded. "Then prove it. Show us something useful." The next day, I gathered the townspeople in the gym. Reyes filmed as I spoke. "The infected are not unstoppable. They are vulnerable. Destroy the brain and the body falls. Burn the corpses and the pathogen cannot spread. Do not bury your dead. Do not hide your sick. If you hesitate, you die." The crowd murmured, fear in their eyes, but some nodded, clutching their rifles tighter. That night the infected came. They staggered from the woods, drawn by the fires. Dozens of them, their moans rising. The barricades shook as they pressed forward. The townspeople panicked, firing wildly. The infected surged, climbing over the cars. I shouted, "Aim for the head!" Rifles cracked, skulls burst, bodies fell. The townspeople rallied, their fear turning to fury. They dragged the corpses into piles, doused them with gasoline, and set them alight. Flames roared, smoke rising into the night. Reyes filmed it all, his voice fierce. Millbrook has survived its first assault. The townspeople fought back, guided by science. For now, they endure. I whispered into my recorder, my voice steady. "The pathogen adapts, but so can we. Knowledge is our weapon, science is our shield. Millbrook has proven that survival is possible if we face the truth." But as the flames died, I saw the fear in their eyes. They didn't trust me. Not yet. And I knew the pathogen was still changing. The small-town lab was a refuge. but it was also a ticking clock. Millbrook had survived its first assault, but survival was fragile. The barricades still smouldered, the townspeople whispered in fear, and my lab in the high school was a target of suspicion. I thought the danger came from the infected outside the walls. I was wrong. It came from within. The soldiers arrived at dawn. Not the ragged volunteers who guarded the barricades, but a convoy of armoured trucks, their engines growling. At their head was Colonel Briggs. His uniform was immaculate, his face carved from stone. The townspeople gathered in the square, rifles raised. The mayor stepped forward, her voice sharp. "This is our town. You don't give orders here." Briggs ignored her. His eyes locked on me. "Dr. Morales, you have something that belongs to the United States government." My chest tightened. "My research." He nodded. "The pathogen is a threat, yes, but it's also an opportunity. With your data, we can weaponize it, control it, turn it against our enemies." The crowd gasped. The mayor's face twisted in fury. "Weaponize? You're insane." Briggs's voice was calm, almost gentle. "Insane is pretending we can stop it. We can't, but we can harness it, and Morales has the key." I shook my head. "No, my research is for survival, not slaughter." His eyes hardened. "Then you're a liability." The soldiers raised their rifles. The townspeople shouted, aiming their hunting guns. The square became a standoff, fear crackling in the air. Reyes stepped beside me, his camera raised. "This is Daniel Reyes, Washington Herald. The U.S. military is threatening civilians in Millbrook, demanding control of scientific research. They want to weaponize the infection." Briggs's face darkened. "Turn that off." Reyes didn't move. "The world deserves to see this." The first shot rang out. Chaos erupted. Soldiers fired into the air. Townspeople returned fire. Screams filled the square, people scattered, diving for cover. I grabbed my notebook, clutching it to my chest. Briggs lunged toward me, but the mayor tackled him, shouting, "Run!" I bolted into the high school, Reyes on my heels. Bullets shattered windows, glass raining down. The hallways echoed with gunfire and screams. We reached the lab. I shoved the door shut, barricading it with desks. My hands shook as I stuffed vials and notes into my bag. Reyes filmed, his voice ragged. "The military is attacking Millbrook. They want Morales' research. They're killing civilians to get it." The door rattled. Soldiers shouted outside, "Open up, Morales! Don't make this harder!" I whispered into my recorder, "This is Dr. Eleanor Morales. Colonel Briggs has betrayed us. He seeks to weaponize the pathogen. He is killing to control it. The government is not our savior. It is our enemy." The door splintered. Soldiers poured in, rifles raised. I swung a chair, knocking one back. Reyes hurled a camera tripod, shattering another's visor. We fled through the back, into the gym. The townspeople had rallied, firing from the bleachers. Soldiers fell, their blood staining the court. The mayor stood at the center, shotgun blazing. Briggs strode in, his pistol raised, his eyes locked on me. "Give me the research, Morales, or everyone here dies." I clutched my bag tighter. "If you want it, you'll have to kill me." He smiled coldly. "Gladly." Before he could fire, the infected arrived. Drawn by the gunfire, they poured through the shattered doors, dozens of them, their moans rising. Soldiers and townspeople alike screamed as the horde descended. Briggs cursed, firing wildly. The infected swarmed him, dragging him down. His screams echoed as they tore into him. The gym dissolved into chaos. Soldiers and civilians fought side by side, their feud forgotten in the face of death. Reyes grabbed my arm. "We have to go." We sprinted through the locker rooms, bursting into the night. Behind us, the gym burned, flames lighting the sky. The screams of the dying echoed through the town. We collapsed in the fields, gasping. My bag was still clutched to my chest, the research intact. Reyes raised his camera, his voice hoarse. Millbrook has been betrayed. The military tried to seize the research. They failed. But the town is burning. The people are dying, and the truth is all that remains. I whispered into my recorder. The pathogen is not our only enemy. The living are just as dangerous. Betrayal is everywhere, and survival grows harder every day. The night was dark, the town in flames. Millbrook had been a refuge. Now it was a battlefield. Word count, 800 exact. Would you like me to continue with Section 14, the broadcast, where Morales hijacks a surviving radio station to deliver her scientific findings to the scattered survivors across the country? On me. Dr. Morales, you have something that belongs to the United States government. My chest tightened. My research. He nodded. The pathogen is a threat, yes, but it's also an opportunity. With your data, we can weaponize it, control it, turn it against our enemies. The crowd gasped. The mayor's face twisted in fury. Weaponize? You're insane. Briggs's voice was calm, almost gentle. Insane is pretending we can stop it. We can't. But we can harness it. And Morales has the key. I shook my head. No, my research is for survival, not slaughter. His eyes hardened. Then you're a liability. The soldiers raised their rifles. The townspeople shouted, aiming their hunting guns. The square became a standoff, fear crackling in the air. Reyes stepped beside me, his camera raised. This is Daniel Reyes, Washington Herald. The U.S. military is threatening civilians in Millbrook, demanding control of scientific research. They want to weaponize the infection. Briggs's face darkened. Turn that off. Reyes didn't move. The world deserves to see this. The first shot rang out. Chaos erupted. Soldiers fired into the air. Townspeople returned fire. Screams filled the square. People scattered, diving for cover. I grabbed my notebook, clutching it to my chest. Briggs lunged towards me, but the mayor tackled him, shouting, "Run!" I bolted into the high school, Reyes on my heels. Bullets shattered windows, glass raining down. The hallways echoed with gunfire and screams. We reached the lab. I shoved the door shut, barricading it with desks. My hands shook as I stuffed vials and notes into my bag. Reyes filmed, his voice ragged. The military is attacking Millbrook. They want Morales' research. They're killing civilians to get it. The door rattled. Soldiers shouted outside, "Open up, Morales! Don't make this harder!" I whispered into my recorder. This is Dr. Elena Morales. Colonel Briggs has betrayed us. He seeks to weaponize the pathogen. He is killing to control it. The government is not our savior. It is our enemy. The door splintered. Soldiers poured in, rifles raised. I swung a chair, knocking one back. Reyes hurled a camera tripod. Shh! The town of Millbrook was gone. Flames licked the night sky, the screams of the dying fading into silence. Reyes and I stumbled through the fields, our clothes torn, our faces streaked with ash. My bag was still clutched to my chest, the research intact. Proof survived, even if the town did not. But proof meant nothing if no one heard it. We found the radio station on the edge of town, a squat brick building with shattered windows and a rusted tower. The sign above the door read, WMBR 88.7 FM. The front lobby was abandoned, papers scattered, coffee cups overturned. The air smelled of dust and smoke. This could work, Reyes said, his voice hoarse. I nodded. If the transmitter's still alive, we can reach survivors. Maybe even other towns. We pushed into the control room. The equipment was old but intact. Mixing boards, microphones, a transmitter humming faintly. A generator rumbled in the basement, its fuel gauge low but not empty. Reyes set up his camera, his hands steady despite the exhaustion. This is it. our chance to tell the world. I sat before the microphone, my notebook open, my recorder beside me. My hands trembled as I adjusted the dials. Static filled the air, then cleared. The red light blinked on. We were live. I leaned into the microphone, my voice steady. This is Dr. Elena Morales. If you can hear me, you are not alone. I was the medical examiner who performed the first autopsy in Baltimore. I have studied the pathogen. I know what it is. I paused, the silence heavy. Then I spoke the truth. The infection does not kill. It reanimates. It overrides death itself, forcing tissue to move long after life has ended. It spreads through bites, through blood, through contact with the infected. It adapts with every host. It cannot be cured, it cannot be contained, but it can be fought. I flipped through my notes, my voice firm. Destroy the brain, burn the bodies, do not bury your dead. Do not hide your sick. If you hesitate, you die. If you deny the truth, you doom everyone around you. Reyes filmed, his camera capturing every word. His eyes burned with conviction. I continued. The government will not save you. They are silencing scientists, weaponizing the infection, killing civilians to maintain control. Do not trust their promises. Trust only what you see. Trust only what you know. I leaned closer, my voice low, urgent. But you are not powerless. Knowledge is your weapon, science is your shield. Share this message and spread it. Let the truth survive, even if we do not. Static crackled, then cleared. The signal was holding. Reyes whispered, "It's working. They're hearing you." I closed my eyes, picturing survivors huddled around radios, families in basements, soldiers in bunkers. Hearing my voice. Hearing the truth. I whispered into the microphone, softer now. If you are listening, know this. You are not alone. We are still here. We are still fighting. And as long as one voice remains, the truth will endure. I clicked off the mic, my hands trembling. The room was silent except for the hum of the transmitter. Reyes lowered his camera, his face pale but determined. That was it. That was the message. I picked up my recorder, my voice steady. This is Dr. Elena Morales. Tonight I broadcast the truth. The infection is real. The dead are walking. The government is lying. But survivors can fight. The truth is out there now, and it cannot be silenced. The generator sputtered, the lights flickering. Fuel was running low. The broadcast wouldn't last forever. But it didn't need to. The message was out. We sat in the dark, the tower humming above us. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to hope. Not safety, not survival, but hope. The broadcast had carried my voice into the night, and somewhere someone was listening. The world is quiet now. Not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of absence. Cities lie in ruins, their skylines jagged against the horizon. Highways are graveyards of rusted cars. The air carries no laughter, no traffic, no music, only the low, distant moans of the dead. I walk alone. Reyes is gone. Millbrook is gone. Washington, Baltimore, all of it, gone. The people I tried to save, the towns I tried to warn, the soldiers who tried to silence me, all swallowed by the same tide. But the truth remains. I carry it in my bag. Notebooks filled with observations, vials of blackened blood, recordings of my voice. Proof that this was not madness, not hysteria, not myth. Proof that I was there at the beginning. Proof that I saw the first corpse open its eyes. Sometimes, when I camp in the ruins of a library or a church, I play back the recordings. My own voice echoes in the dark. This is Dr. Elena Morales. The dead are not staying dead. It reminds me I was not always a wanderer. I was a scientist. I was a witness. And I am still both. The infection has changed. The dead move faster now, their moans sharper, their hunger deeper. The pathogen mutates with every host, every town, every battlefield. It is no longer what I saw in Baltimore. It is something worse, something evolving. But so do we. I've seen survivors adapt. Farmers who learn to burn their fields to keep the dead away. Children who can tell the difference between a living cough and a dying one. Families who move silently through the night, never lighting fires, never leaving tracks. Humanity is not gone. It is scattered, broken, but not gone. Sometimes, when I pass through a town, I hear whispers. They speak of me, not by name, but by myth. The scientist who examined the first corpse, the one who saw the beginning, the one who carries the truth. I don't know if it's hope or fear that keeps the story alive, but it means the truth has spread farther than my voice ever could. And that is enough. I sit now on the steps of a ruined courthouse, the sky burning orange with sunset. My recorder rests in my hand, its red light blinking. My voice is hoarse, but steady. This is Dr. Eleanor Morales. If you are hearing this, know that the infection began with one corpse in Baltimore. I was the scientist who examined it. I watched it rise. I watched the world fall. And I have carried the truth ever since. I pause, staring at the horizon. The moans drift closer, carried on the wind. The dead walk. The living endure. And the record survives. If humanity rebuilds, let these words be the foundation. If humanity falls, let them be the epitaph. I click the recorder off. The sun dips below the horizon, shadows stretching long. The dead are coming. I can hear them in the streets, their footsteps dragging, their voices hollow. I rise, my bag slung over my shoulder, my axe in hand. I am tired, but not finished. Because I am not just a survivor. I am the last scientist. And as long as I breathe, the truth will not die.